All right, everyone. Hello, hello. My name is Aminta, and I am the program specialist at Cobb County Water System. I'm actually not the presenter today. We've got an exciting new presenter for our Lunch and Learn series. I'm so excited to introduce you all very, very soon. Today, I'm going to start off with a little bit of housekeeping because I am your moderator. So welcome to Cisco WebEx. It's been updated a couple of times. I'm sure many of you are well familiar with other types of video conferencing platforms. I just want to give you the rundown on how you can interact with us. So to start with, if you are logging in from a computer, you can unmute and turn on your microphone. Oh, hello, everyone. My name's Aminta, and I'm just going over a little bit of housekeeping. So if you would like, you can certainly mute or unmute yourself. We recommend that you keep yourself muted at least until the presentation is over. Let's see here. At the bottom of the Cisco WebEx screen, you can also turn or turn off your video. I love seeing all your lovely faces, but I can understand if it's Friday and you're exhausted, you can certainly turn off your video too. So those options are available to you. And my favorite feature of Cisco WebEx is our chat function. So if you are using a computer, it will be on the bottom right-hand side of our screen. Click the chat box at any time during the presentation and just don't be shy. Share your thoughts. You can test it out right now, actually, if you would like. Just say hello to us and your speaker, who I'm going to introduce shortly. One last thing. This presentation itself, not any of your faces will be recorded. We're trying to record it so that we can share it with you all as a resource later on. So we will not be recording anyone's faces, but if you want to safeguard against that, please turn off your video until the Q&A feature, okay? All right, so I am so excited to introduce to you all our guest speaker for today, Mr. Kevin Spingler. So in just a moment, I'm going to bring him on board and he'll start the presentation. All right? And here we go. I'm going to move him to the stage. And there he is.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm going to share my screen with you. Welcome to my presentation. We're looking at the plankton in pond water, and I'm going to introduce you to how to find these plankton, what kinds of plankton you might see, and how best to observe them. In this presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box and I'll answer them at appropriate points in the presentation. I'm Kevin Spingler. I'm a teacher. I've been a middle school and high school teacher for more than 38 years. I earned my Bachelor of Science at Rutgers University. I majored in both biology and chemistry. I also have a Master of Science with a thesis option in marine biology from Nova Southeastern University. My thesis topic was on plankton communities. I've been an adopt-a-stream volunteer for about a year in Georgia, and my original training was in Indiana. From a young age, I was a science nerd. I had my own microscope, and in the basement of our house, growing up, I would create these hay infusions, go out, get grass clippings, put them in some water and see what grew in them. And I'd look at those hay infusions for hours at a time or every summer day. Doctors Hugo and Anita Freudenthal were important influences in my graduate studies and in cultivating my interest in plankton communities. Anita also worked as with the public health department, and she had a particular interest in how plankton can affect the health of people near the water. So what are the plankton? The word plankton is derived from a Greek word, planktos. Planktos means wanderer. It's the same root word for planets. Plankton are drifters. They're wanderers in the water. They may be good swimmers, but they're so small or so weak that they can't overcome the power of the currents and the water, and so they're pushed around by them, usually due to their small size, but even jellyfish are considered to be plankton and comb jellies. There are four broad categories of plankton that are found in all the waters of the earth. The first type are the phytoplankton. You can see an example of a phytoplankton from a pond on the campus of my school. These organisms have the capacity to do photosynthesis. They come in a wide variety of types, including blue-green algae, green algae, diatoms, dinoflagellates, euglenoids, chrysophytes, and Kryptomonads. Then you have your zooplankton. And this happens to be a picture of a cladoceran, a species known as Bosminia. They are consumers that feed on phytoplankton or on other zooplankton, and they're very important to the aquatic food chains. Some zooplankton spend their entire lives as plankton, and others are in plankton for only a part of their life cycle. Third category of plankton are the bacterioplankton. Some of the water quality volunteers with Georgia Adopt-A-Stream monitor one type of bacteria in water bodies by testing for coliform bacteria. This is one of the coliform bacteria samples that I've taken. And then you have the viroplankton. The picture here shows some bacterioplankton and viroplankton taken from Chesapeake Bay. The items labeled A and B in the picture. It's an A and an A up here and a B down here. Those are different types of viruses that were found in the water, and viruses are found in the water naturally. Not all of them are going to affect humans, but some do. So where are plankton found? Plankton can be found in the oceans. They can be found in estuaries where freshwater and saltwater mix. The plankton in these estuary environments are very important to the development of sport fish, because many sport fish and fish that are fished commercially start their lives in these estuaries. And plankton are also found in freshwater lakes and ponds. Plankton are hard to find in streams and creeks and rivers because of the movement of the water. In pools where water flows slow and portions of the creeks or stream are isolated from water flow, you may find some plankton, but in the actual flowing water, you're not going to find a whole lot of plankton because they're just going to be pushed away very quickly. Relatives of plankton, however, can attach to surfaces in the moving water, such as in the riffles and rapids on the rocks and the stream bottom, and they can form coats on these materials at the bottom of the creek, stream, or river in these benthic habitats. So why are plankton important? Plankton are important for primary production. Primary production is the process where sunlight energy is captured and converted into chemical energy and stored in organic compounds. So you have your sun coming in, passing through the water. The phytoplankton convert that sunlight energy into organic materials. They're fed on by the zooplankton that are fed on by the fish. And then you have other types of processes happening as well in these organic chemical cycles. Some scientists estimate that as much as 50% of all the primary production, all the conversion of sunlight into organic compounds, is done by the phytoplankton. That's because our ocean is about 70% of the surface area of the Earth. So even though many parts of the ocean, as you can see in this picture, those would be the places that have the blue and the purple colors, there's only a small amount of primary production because the surface area is so extensive that that's going to cause the amount of primary production, even in those large, mostly barren areas, to have a lot of productivity. But you can also see in areas off the coast of the United States, up in the North Atlantic, in the North Sea area, and in areas around Antarctica, in these cold water areas, you have huge amounts of primary production going on. They're some of the most productive places in the world. Phytoplankton are also an important source of atmospheric oxygen. They keep the waters oxygenated. So carbon dioxide from the atmosphere comes in, phytoplankton use that and create oxygen, and the oxygen goes back into the atmosphere. Plankton play an important role in cycling and sequestration of carbon globally. Most of your fossil fuels, for instance, were produced by plankton in the Earth's past, where the dissolved carbon dioxide coming from the atmosphere goes into the water. The phytoplankton, through photosynthesis, produce organic matter. Carbon dioxide also reacts with the water to produce bicarbonic acid, which then undergoes some more chemical reactions to produce carbonate ion. And the carbonate ion is utilized by many creatures to produce shells. And when those creatures die, the carbonate is deposited as limestone and it's taken out of the atmosphere. Phytoplankton are important parts at the base of the aquatic food chain, and zooplankton that feed on the phytoplankton provide food for many important fish. Without the phytoplankton and the zooplankton, you wouldn't have the organisms that people are more interested in. And finally, phytoplankton are also responsible for many public health issues, including harmful algae blooms. So these often appear in newspapers, they appear in TV shows. Examples of some harmful algae blooms include the bloom that occurred last year in Lake Okeechobee, and this is a NASA satellite picture of this harmful algae bloom. I think it was produced by a blue-green algae, and the green color is where this bloom has actually changed the color of the water and is visible from satellite. Another satellite photo here from NASA. This is a harmful algae bloom that occurred in Lake Erie. This occurred in 2014 and actually was so bad that it disrupted the water flow intake for the city of Toledo. And that was a rough situation. This is a close-up picture of the Lake Erie harmful algae bloom. The National Guard actually had to bring in trucks to the neighborhoods in the city of Toledo with clean water for residences. And people would have to go outside to these trucks when they came into their neighborhood and fill up all the containers they had in their house with clean water. And that's how the water that they used for drinking, for cooking, for bathing, for cleaning dishes, and for any other purpose. It was a major news story in 2014. Other types of harmful algae blooms include the red tides that happen in Florida almost every year now. They cause a lot of economic havoc along the Gulf Coast, and some of these red tides have actually started appearing along the East Coast, the Atlantic coast of Florida as well. And another example of a harmful algae bloom is the area around the Mississippi Delta. Every year now, dead zone is created because of the algae bloom, and then when the nutrients are used up, the algae die, and in the decomposition process, oxygen is removed from the water, and the fish and the crabs and the shrimp, they either have to move out of the area, or if they can't move out of the area, they die from suffocation. Harmful algae blooms even occur in Georgia lakes. There was a recent case in Lake Allatoona where a dog went for a swim and died after adjusting water that had a toxic blue-green algae bloom occurring in it. Are there any questions at this point before we continue?
Are there any short-term or long-term strategies out there to combat this what looks like a pandemic in its own right?
For harmful algae blooms, most of the blooms occur because there's an influx of nutrients into the
Yes.
water. And the best way to prevent them is to try to keep those nutrients from entering the water. And they've been trying to figure out ways, especially farmers, of limiting the number of the amount of fertilizers that they're spreading on the land to get their crops to grow. They also try to create buffer zones between the cropland and the rivers where the runoff is going so that the nutrients are absorbed before they go into the water. The mitigation of nutrient runoff is one of the few things that we can do to try to keep these harmful blooms from occurring. And we have had varying success with that. Any other questions? George, did I answer that question for you?
Well, to a certain extent, of course, the farmers and all you have to do is look at Australia, for example. They're going to do as little as possible in terms of cost to mitigate this problem. And that simply, I believe, is the fact of the matter. I believe that government will have to step in order to compel them to do all that they really need, all that really needs to be done. Joe Biden may be starting on that. I'm not sure. I did have one other question, though, because this is something you just need to look at every day at CNN to see what progress, if any, they're making. Um, Everybody knows about sea level rise and how it's going to be its own pandemic of a sort within the next 20 years or so. How is this going to affect algae? I'm sorry, well, plankton, so to speak. Or is that further on in your lecture today?
Well, sea level rise is just adding more water to the oceans. And if it's covering land and there's a lot of organic nutrients on the land that's being covered, that those nutrients, until they're sequestered by natural biological processes, are going to promote blooms. Um,
So,
that's the simple matter of it, but I'm trying to avoid politics here as much as possible and be as gentle as I can. Um, I do know that uh, in Ohio, for instance, the farmers are affected by the fact that the runoff is introducing nutrients into Lake Erie because some of the water that they use to irrigate the land for their farms comes from Lake Erie. So they are invested in trying to mitigate the runoff from the fertilizer. And they've been doing a good job at producing buffers because it's in their best interest to do that.
mhm.
Um, as far as the Florida situation, with all the runoff and nutrient being added to Lake Okeechobee and to the red tides along the coast, they're trying to come up and formulate a policy in order to mitigate that. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. If you want to look at plankton yourself, and I would encourage you to do it, there's just a few simple tools that you need. First is a method of concentrating plankton. What I've shown you here is a plankton net that I bought for my classroom. You don't have to have something that fancy. You can make one out of a nylon stocking, a small jar, a coat hanger, and some string. Basically, the coat hanger is going to be turned into a circle at the tip of, or at the open end of the nylon stocking. And you can secure that in a variety of ways. Duct tape works just as well as anything else. The string can be used to tie to the coat hanger. And then the nylon stocking, you don't have to do anything with it, and you can put a baby food jar in where the toes are, and then tie a string to the coat hanger or at several locations to keep it wide and open, and toss it out into the water and drag it along the surface. You want to avoid trying to get it on the bottom of the water, but as you pull it through the water column, you'll collect and concentrate the plankton that are in the water. And in some places, you don't have to do too many toes in order to concentrate a large number of plankton that are in the water. So you just drag the net through, rinse the sides to concentrate the plankton at the bottom. Keep the sample cool if you want to see the plankton live, or just get some iodine that you'd get in a drugstore and add a few drops. You don't have to add very many drops, just a few drops to the sample with iodine solution, and that'll preserve the plankton, and they'll float to the bottom of the jar. And then just with a medicine dropper, you can pick this back the plankton from the bottom of the jar and look at them under the microscope. You will also need a microscope to view the organisms, along with a slide, a medicine dropper, and a cover slip to cover the sample. This happens to be one of the microscopes that I have in my lab. There are inexpensive cell phone cradles that allow you to place your cell phone camera over the eyepiece lens of the microscope, and you can view the organisms as well as take pictures and video through your cell phone. I do this all the time in my classes with my students, and all the pictures that you're going to see later on are pictures that I've taken using my cell phone camera. The plankton may be zipping around. To slow them down, you can use a solution of methylcellulose. You may go, well, what's methylcellulose? It's the material that's found in Citracel. So you can buy some Citracel off grocery store shelf and mix just a small amount of that in a water solution and add a few drops of that, and that'll slow, because it's fibers basically, it'll thicken the water and slow those speeding zooplankton and phytoplankton down so that you can see them a little bit better. So where do you go with your trusty plankton net to sample the plankton? Almost any body of water that does not have a significant current could be a place to collect the plankton. You can drag from the side of a pond by tossing the net in and pulling it through the water column to you. That's what I do at school when I'm in the morning when I'm getting ready to get a sample for my kids to view. If you take a picture of the plankton, then you can upload the picture to the app iNaturalist, and that can assist you in identifying the organism. It gives suggestions of what the picture might be, and then there are a lot of folks out there who are specialists in the field, and they'll look at your picture and help you to figure out what the organism is. Otherwise, there are lots of various web pages and books and guides that are out there that can help you to, as you thumb through them, to try to narrow down the identifications as well. What types of plankton might I see? Well, as far as phytoplankton goes, there are lots of different types of phytoplankton that you might see in a plankton sample. One type of phytoplankton that I hope you don't see, they're the cyanobacteria, the blue-green algae. Blooms of those are toxic, and if the water has a greenish color, I would avoid sampling that water, or being very careful with mask on and rubber gloves on. Take a sample of the water and then send it to a water quality and lab that can evaluate it, because the cyanobacteria can be pretty nasty. Some of them can be. There's others that are relatively benign, but if you see microcystis species like you see in this picture here, they're responsible for some of the harmful algae blooms. So you want to be careful there. There are all types of green algae that can be found in freshwater plankton samples. The green algae or the chlorophytes, they may be single-celled or they may form colonies in a variety of shapes and sizes. This picture shows some volvox. This is a colonial green algae. Each one of those green dots is an individual cell, and they form this ball, which is a relatively empty in the center unless they're reproducing. And in this picture up here, you can see the beginnings of a new colony of volvox, 3 or 4 of them beginning to form. And that's how this particular species reproduces. These are some pictures that I've seen of green algae in a variety of samples that I've taken. This is a colonial form. I think that's, oh, I can't remember off the top of my head the name of the species. Pediastrum, that's it. This is Closterium, and this is an unidentified species that I haven't successfully gone through and figured out what it is yet. But these are some of the examples of the green algae that can be found in the samples. The Pediastrum colony the cells have cilia, and that'll float around in the water. These others, 2 species don't, and they just kind of sit in the water photosynthesizing and sometimes being eaten by the zooplankton. I love these euglenoids. They're kind of a cross between zooplankton and phytoplankton. They have a single flagellum, so they swim around. They have this red eye spot up here. And again, this is a single cell, so this isn't an eye. This is an eye spot, a photo sensing spot to help them keep in the photic zone. They have chloroplasts, but if conditions aren't right for photosynthesis, they can also engulf other cells and eat them. So they're a combination of both autotrophs and heterotrophs. Diatoms are common in both freshwater, estuaries, and ocean waters. They're more common in coastal ocean water environments. But you can see those. This is a time of year when the diatoms are blooming in many of the ponds and lakes in the area. Dinoflagellates are also both autotrophs and heterotrophs. They're motile. They have 2 flagella. One wraps around the center of the cell in this groove, and the other propels them forward. And when you watch them live, it's like this spinning torpedo that's going through the water, and it's really cool to see. The dinoflagellates some species are also responsible for harmful algae blooms, like the red tides, or the Phaceria piscida species that was first discovered in North Carolina and has been found all the way from Chesapeake Bay down to Florida now, including the coastal waters of Georgia and the estuary environments there. This has just a bizarre life cycle. There's like somewhere, I've heard 19 different stages. I've heard 27 different life stages. It's a very strange type of dinoflagellate, and all the different life stages have different appearances. So it's just kind of awesome what they figured out about it. And it also, some of its life stages also produce symptoms that affect people who come in contact with the water or fish from the water that are affected by the dinoflagellate. And the original researchers actually were affected by some of those symptoms, and they didn't realize it at first. Just a fascinating and bizarre species, this Pfisteria. The Sonora species that you see here, they're in the Chrysophyceae. They're golden brown algae. These are colonial. You can barely see on the tips of some of these cells the cilia that propel them around. And there are also Kryptomonads. This is a small, predominantly freshwater group of organisms. I haven't directly observed any Kryptomonads that I can positively identify yet, so I don't have any pictures of those yet. But those are the types of phytoplankton that you might see in freshwater environments. Zooplankton, you can see in this picture here. The zooplankton are very abundant in freshwater environments. And they're very diverse in limited groups. And I know that sounds kind of contradictory, but there are predominantly 5 types of zooplankton that can be found in freshwater environments. There are way more in marine environments. But in freshwater environments, you're going to find rotifers, you're going to find copepods, you're going to find cladocerans, you're going to find protozoans, and you're going to find larvae, predominantly fish larvae, but some other types of larvae as well. And these 2 organisms here in this picture, if you can see where my cursor arrow is, those are rotifers. This is a cladoceran. This is a rotifer down here, and there's some ciliates and other types of organisms as well. Rotifers have the following characteristics. And this is a rotifer that's been very common in the month of May in the retention pond on our campus. They have cilia that rotate in wheel-like structures that move the water around. The populations are usually all female under normal conditions. Under normal conditions, you're not going to find any males in the population. That means reproduction is by virgin birth, by parthenogenesis. Each female will produce eggs. The eggs are almost the size of the female itself. And they're unfertilized. So that will continue producing females. If there are stressful conditions in the pond, males can be produced to help promote genetic variation within the population by sexually reproducing. But under normal conditions, when the females or when the rotifers have plenty of food and other environmental conditions are normal, it's all going to be females in the population. The rotifers eat bacteria, they can eat phytoplankton, and they can eat other rotifers. I wish I could find the slide that I had that a student of mine took, which showed one rotifer that had ingested another rotifer. Just incredible picture. Populations can grow to very high numbers of rotifers in ponds and lakes, and they're almost all freshwater organisms. Rotifer eggs can be quite large, and you can see two of these eggs here, and this is a rotifer in comparison, and this is that Clusterium green algae for comparison. And those eggs are amniotic. They actually have a large amount of nutrients in them. Copepods are another type of arthropod. They are found in all types of aquatic environments, and they're very important in those environments where they're found. To the right, this is a larval stage of the copepod. You can see its eye spot, its feeding appendages, and its swimming appendages. This is where that arrow's pointing. That's an adult copepod. This is a cyclops type of copepod because it has the one eye spot. The females, if you get them at the right time, you can see egg cases streaming from the left and right of their tail assemblage here. Cladocerans like Daphnia, and this is a relative of Daphnia called Bosminia, are mostly freshwater species. Their populations, like rotifers, are mostly female, and again, they reproduce under normal conditions by parthenogenesis. They have a heart that's quite visible under a microscope, and we have a video to show you in a moment that shows the heart beating. Their heart rate's affected by many environmental conditions and chemicals, so they make really good experimental organisms when testing metabolic rates in lab settings. The cladocerans do molt, and their discarded carapaces, called exuvia, can be fossilized, and they're most abundant in the spring and summer. I'm seeing a lot of them in the samples I'm taking from the lake in May and June. Protozoans in freshwater environments are often found on the bottom, but there are several species that can swim in the water column, like the paramecium that you see here. And a final category of zooplankton is kind of like a miscellaneous category. They're the larvae of fish, mollusks, and worms. In this category, you're also going to see accidental plankton, such as insect larvae. The bacterioplankton, again, these can be sampled most conveniently using coliform plates, like you can see here. And there's a way to, if you're an AdoptStream member, you can get trained on the protocols to sample the coliform bacteria that are present in samples. All right, any questions at this point before we go to the video? Go ahead.
I just wondered, the phytoplankton or other kinds of plankton, can they get into our groundwater?
The groundwater would be filtered, so those plankton can't get into the groundwater itself. So I would say no.
Oh, good to know.
All right. I'm going to stop sharing a moment, and I'm going to share screen. Oh. Stop sharing. There we go. Sorry. This happens to be a video of the Bosminia. And you can see the hearts beating right here. I hope everyone can see that. There's the heart. This is the digestive system. If you're following my cursor, you can see it's well fed on plankton. These are some of the respiratory structures. And then it's got its antenna up here. These are the Sonora colonies, and there's a rotifer making a surprise appearance, photobombing the Sonora. This is a Volvox type of species, and you can see a ciliate moving around here. And they just kind of spin around. It's kind of mesmerizing if you watch. This is one of the rotifer species, and if you look carefully right here and right here, they have these what are called corona. They're circles of cilia that are spinning around and around, and you can see the water moving and particles in the water moving and being directed into their gullet. This is another picture of that, and again, you can see the particles moving around and around. And that's how it gets the food into its gullet and into its digestive system. And this is another species. And again, you can see the corona here and here. And this one is called Caratella. And there's a lot of species of Caratella, and it's like it's living inside of a wine glass. So, any questions at this point? Any other questions? Well, thank you for your attention and joining us. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to watch this presentation, and I hope it was informative. I think you're muted. Oh, no, you're on. There you go. I can't hear you. Should I mute myself?
All right, I think I switched to another speaker. Everyone, please take some time to thank Kevin for his participation in our Lunch and Learn series and for offering his expertise and his experience. It's so cool to see some of these plankton live on a video. And we actually had the opportunity to see them moving, and you can actually see some of their smaller parts clearly and crisply. So we're very thankful for Kevin for sharing that footage with us. If you didn't have a microphone that's working currently, you can still certainly leave your questions and responses in the chat box. We'll collect those and disseminate our responses after the presentation. But that's pretty much it for now. I hope you all will stay tuned next month for our Lunch and Learn series again. Typically, they are on Fridays. All right. Well, thank you so much and have a great day, everyone. Thanks again, Kevin. I had so much fun and I learned a lot.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Have a good day, everyone.
Have a great
Bye,
weekend.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Thank you.